The lunchtime rush at the Grove in Los Angeles pulsed with the rhythm of clinking cutlery and low murmurs. Waiters weaved between tables, balancing trays and dodging toddlers. At a quiet corner booth near the window, 70-year-old Eleanor Watkins stirred her iced tea slowly, watching the people more than her cup. Her silver curls were neatly pinned, and a cloth tote sat beside her. Same table, same hour every Tuesday. She wasn't here for the food. Across the restaurant, a familiar presence entered. Tall, confident, unmistakable, Magic Johnson. He nodded politely to a couple of fans who recognized him and was soon seated at a reserved booth across the floor. Eleanor's eyes, sharp beneath her soft expression, followed him. To most, it was just another celebrity sighting in LA. But to Eleanor, something was off. She'd seen Magic dine here 3 times in the past 2 months, always with different guests, always pleasant, always tipping well. But this time he seemed agitated. He was alone. And when the waiter brought his food, grilled chicken, steamed vegetables, no carbs, Eleanor leaned forward, frowning. The plate. Her years as a food safety inspector for the city, a job she held before retirement, had left her with a well-trained eye. Something glistened on the vegetables, not from steam but an odd sheen. A smell tickled her nose, faint, metallic. She looked toward the kitchen instinctively. A new prep cook. The kid had just dropped a tray. Another waiter whispered to him, annoyed. Eleanor's eyes darted back to Magic. He picked up his fork. "Excuse me," she called out loudly, startling several nearby diners. Magic paused mid-bite. His fork hovered. Eleanor stood slowly, heart pounding. "Please don't eat that," she said, voice trembling but firm. He looked at her, confused. "Ma'am?" People were staring now. I used to work in health inspection. Something's not right with that dish," she said. "There's a smell, a sheen I don't recognize." A manager came rushing over. "Is there a problem?" Eleanor ignored the buzz of attention around her. Her gaze stayed on the plate. "I think there might be contamination," she said. "Cross-contact or worse. Smells like degreaser or a chemical rinse." Magic slowly set down his fork. The manager looked pale now. "Get that plate back to the kitchen," he told the server. "Right now." Chaos rippled quietly through the staff. The manager crouched by Magic's table, apologizing. Eleanor backed away, shaken. She hadn't meant to make a scene. 20 minutes later, after multiple apologies and tests, the kitchen confirmed her suspicion. A cleaning agent, improperly rinsed from a pan, had tainted the vegetables. Not enough to kill, but enough to hospitalize. Magic stood and walked over to Eleanor's table. He extended his hand. "You just saved me from a really bad day," he said, smiling warmly. "Maybe worse." Eleanor flushed. "I didn't mean to be intrusive." "Sometimes the right thing is intrusive," he said. People were taking pictures now, but Eleanor barely noticed. She sipped her tea again, hands still trembling. Magic looked at her kindly. "What's your name?" Eleanor Watkins." "Well, Miss Watkins, you're a hero today." Her eyes softened. "Just an old habit. I used to care about things like this." "You still do," he said. And across the restaurant the quiet returned, but something had changed. In the eyes watching her now, there was recognition, not just of a celebrity, but of a woman who had stepped up when it mattered. Subscribe for more and leave a comment. What would you have done in Eleanor's place? And don't forget to check the next video waiting for you right here on the screen. The following morning, Eleanor stood by her small kitchen window, pouring birdseed into a ceramic feeder shaped like a teacup. Sunlight filtered through the blinds, casting soft stripes across the worn linoleum floor. She watched a sparrow land, then fly away again. The headlines had already reached her. Woman stops Magic Johnson from food scare at LA Bistro. Retired inspector prevents possible poisoning. She turned the volume down on the TV. Her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Her niece from Bakersfield, a former colleague from the inspection office, even Pastor Doyle from church, all praising her, some laughing in disbelief, but Eleanor didn't feel heroic. She felt unsettled. It wasn't just luck. She was sure of what she saw and smelled. What nagged at her was how it happened, so precisely, so quietly, that no one else had noticed. The smell was faint. The pan, likely rinsed by a distracted new hire. A single layer of negligence. She sat at the small table, her knees cracking as she lowered herself into the chair. Her tote bag sat on the counter, still with her old inspection notebook inside. A habit she hadn't broken even 10 years into retirement. She opened it. Notes, names, kitchens she'd shut down, reports she never filed. Some were just observations of places that almost did something wrong but caught it in time. There had been a few close calls over the years. One in 2007 came to mind now. A fast casual Mexican place that reused containers of cleaning solution without relabeling them. The similarity made her stomach tighten. In that case too, a new employee had made the mistake. She looked back at the article on her phone. A quote from the restaurant's PR team. "We thank Ms. Watkins for her attentiveness and assure our guests that corrective action has been taken." It sounded too polished. And then, a knock at her door. Eleanor glanced at the clock. 9:42 a.m. She peeked through the peephole. A young woman in business attire, holding a leather folder, nervous smile. Eleanor opened the door just enough to peek her head out. "Yes?" "Hi, Ms. Watkins? My name is Lisa Harper. I work with a health and safety non-profit. We saw the article. I was hoping to speak with you." Eleanor hesitated. "About what?" "Well, about what happened yesterday, and also some other recent reports." Eleanor frowned. "What kind of reports?" Lisa lowered her voice. "You ever heard of a man named Colin Rowe? He owns 3 kitchens across the city. One of them is the one where Magic Johnson ate." Eleanor's eyes narrowed. Lisa continued. 2 months ago, a small outbreak of E. coli was linked to another of his restaurants. It was brushed off, quietly settled. No news coverage, but our team's been looking into it. "And you think yesterday wasn't just an accident?" Lisa nodded. "We think it's a pattern. The kind you used to spot for a living." Eleanor stepped back, leaving the door wide enough to invite her in. "Come on," she said. "Tell me everything." As the kettle began to whistle on the stove, Lisa spread papers across the table. Timelines, flagged reports, violations that never got followed up. Eleanor's fingers hovered over the pages. "This is negligence," she whispered. "It might be worse," Lisa replied. For the first time in a long while, Eleanor felt something stir beneath her ribs. Not fear, not pride, but duty. The moment wasn't over. It had only just begun. Eleanor hadn't touched her inspection badge in years, but by that afternoon she found herself holding it again. The brass was worn, the edges dulled. Still, it felt like part of her palm remembered the weight. Lisa sat across the table, flipping through her folder. "This guy, Colin Rowe, he's slick, keeps operations under LLCs, changes kitchen managers every 6 months. We've talked to 2 whistleblowers. Both quit before they could file formal complaints." Eleanor leaned closer. "And that kitchen yesterday, that wasn't a one-off." Lisa shook her head. 2 near violations reported by former staffers, chemical misuse, untrained hires, no paper trail. Eleanor stared out her window. Traffic murmured in the distance. "So how do we catch him?" Lisa hesitated. "We're not government, we're a non-profit watchdog. We document, we publish. But people like you, how'd you still have credibility, authority? If you were willing..." Eleanor's brow furrowed. "You want me to go back into that kitchen? Not as an inspector, as a customer, observing, asking questions. I'm 70. Lisa smiled gently. "Exactly. Who would suspect you?" By Thursday, Eleanor had found her old notepad and a pair of soft-soled shoes. She dressed in beige and navy, colors that faded into the background, and made her way to the second restaurant on Lisa's list, a cozy-looking brunch spot in Culver City. She sat at the counter, ordered a scone and tea, and watched. The young man behind the counter was multitasking, taking orders, slicing fruit, pouring sanitizer into a bucket, but the bottle he used was unlabeled. Eleanor's eyes narrowed. She watched him dip a cloth into the bucket, then wipe a cutting board, then immediately return to chopping strawberries. No rinse, no gloves. She jotted notes quietly. When her tea arrived, she smiled, thanked him, and sipped, eyes never leaving the work area. By the time she left, Eleanor had 4 observations, 3 clear violations, and a growing sense of urgency. That night, she called Lisa. "There's more, you were right, it's systemic." Lisa was silent for a beat. "I'll meet you tomorrow. There's someone else you should talk to." The next morning, they met at a park bench near Echo Park Lake. Lisa wasn't alone. A man in his 50s with tired eyes and an envelope in his hands greeted Eleanor with a nervous nod. "This is Ramon. He worked as a kitchen supervisor under Rowe 3 years ago." "I saw it happening," Ramon said, voice low. "We were told to save time by skipping certain cleaning steps. They gave us unlabeled chemicals. I filed a complaint. Next week, I was let go." Eleanor opened the envelope. Photos, notes, old safety logs with edits in 2 different handwritings. "This is enough to start a report," she whispered. Ramon looked down. "I've been afraid for years, thought no one cared." "You were right to be afraid," Eleanor said, "but now you're not alone." By the end of the week, Eleanor and Lisa had compiled 3 incident reports from separate locations. She had contacted a former colleague still working at the city office, quietly, carefully. They'd reopened the inspection logs, unofficially at first, but the real challenge loomed, getting someone like Colin Rowe to face consequences without tipping him off too soon. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" Lisa asked, watching Eleanor scribble more notes across a worn inspection form. Eleanor smiled faintly. "I spent decades teaching young inspectors to trust their instincts." "I've ignored mine for too long." She folded the paper, slid it back into her tote. "This isn't just about Magic Johnson. It's about every plate that almost became a headline." The third location was the most discreet, a sleek, upscale restaurant tucked beneath a boutique hotel in West Hollywood. No signs of chaos, no glaring violations. Just elegance, dim lighting, and quiet jazz playing through discreet ceiling speakers. But Eleanor had learned that the more polished the surface, the easier it was to hide the cracks. She entered dressed like any guest, soft blouse, pearl earrings, a silk scarf. She was met with courtesy, seated promptly, and offered lemon water in a chilled glass, but she wasn't here to be pampered. As she scanned the menu, she caught sight of the kitchen window, a partial view into the prep area. 2 men worked quickly. One of them, tall and impatient, barked something to a line cook. The other, a younger man with a ponytail, froze momentarily. Her eyes narrowed. The manager passed by Eleanor's table. She smiled sweetly. "Lovely spot," she said. "Thank you, ma'am." "We do our best." "Quick question, is your chef Colin Rowe?" The manager blinked. "He's one of the owners, yes, not in tonight." "Oh, I just heard he was very involved," she said with an innocent smile. "Great reputation." The man nodded tightly and moved on. But his reaction had told her something. Eleanor ordered lightly, soup and bread, and watched the kitchen like a hawk. The busboy, perhaps 17 or 18, dropped a fork, picked it up, and placed it back in a tray of clean silverware. No supervisor noticed. A few minutes later, the soup arrived. Steaming, rich-smelling. Eleanor didn't touch it. Instead, she leaned closer. It smelled faintly like bleach, not again. She flagged her waiter discreetly. "Sorry to trouble you," she said softly, "but this soup, something's off." The waiter looked nervous. "I can take it back." "No need, but I suggest someone check the pot." He nodded and took the bowl, disappearing into the back. Moments later, a raised voice cut through the air, a barked order in the kitchen, sharp and defensive. Eleanor caught the name Rowe mentioned in a hurried whisper. The next day, she sat down with Lisa and 2 men from the city's health department, both former colleagues of Eleanor's. She laid out everything: photos, notes, timestamps, even the untouched soup sample she'd preserved in a clean container, now being tested at a lab. One of the inspectors, Ted Morris, shook his head slowly. "This is enough to initiate an official sweep, quietly." Simultaneously, Lisa leaned forward. "But how do we make sure it sticks?" Eleanor had already thought it through. "We get eyes on him. Public eyes. He's gotten away with this because no one notices the small things." That's when Lisa pulled out her phone and played a voicemail. "Ms. Watkins," the voice said, "this is Cedric from the local morning show. We'd love to feature your story, the hero who saved Magic Johnson." Eleanor looked up. "Say yes," Lisa blinked. "Really? If we're going to pull back the curtain on Colin Rowe, we need the public looking right at him." 2 days later, Eleanor sat under soft studio lights retelling her moment at the Grove. But this time she ended differently. "There's more than one dangerous plate in this city," she said calmly, "and one man's behind most of them." The host sat stunned. "Are you saying there's an ongoing public health risk?" "I'm saying it's already happened. We just got lucky." The interview aired that evening. By morning, all 3 of Rowe's restaurants had unannounced inspectors at the door. And Eleanor? She sat at her window, watching the birds again, phone in hand, waiting for Lisa's call. When it came, her voice trembled. "They found everything, Eleanor. All of it. You were right." 3 weeks after the inspections, Colin Rowe's restaurant group quietly shuttered 2 locations. The third remained open, for now, but with a new kitchen manager, new staff, and under ongoing scrutiny from the city. Fines were issued. A civil investigation opened. But what truly made the story explode was Eleanor's second appearance on TV. This time, she wasn't introduced just as the woman who saved Magic Johnson. Now she was Eleanor Watkins, retired inspector, whistleblower, and advocate. She walked slowly onto the set, the host greeting her with genuine warmth. The live audience clapped, not out of spectacle but respect. "How does it feel," the host asked, "to be at the center of something this big?" Eleanor smiled gently. "Unexpected, but right. I just did what I'd trained myself to do, pay attention." The host leaned in. "You've started something, Eleanor. People are calling for tighter food safety laws. You've inspired a watchdog movement." Eleanor looked down at her folded hands. If that's true, then maybe retirement came too early. The audience chuckled, but she wasn't joking. After the show, Lisa met her in the green room. "You're a bit of a legend now," she said, holding out her phone. "Even Magic Johnson tweeted about you again." Eleanor read the post aloud. "Some heroes don't wear capes, they carry notepads. Thank you, Eleanor Watkins." She smiled softly. But back home, Eleanor didn't feel like a hero. She felt grounded, whole, like something lost had quietly returned. Her days fell into a peaceful rhythm again. Early mornings, tea by the window, scribbled notes in the margins of newspapers. But the phone calls continued. A local university wanted her to guest lecture. A non-profit asked if she'd consult. A publisher even reached out, curious if she'd consider writing a book. But what stayed with her most was a letter. No return address, handwritten. "Dear Miss Watkins, you don't know me, but I was one of the line cooks at the Grove the day you stopped that plate. I was scared. I just started. I saw the mistake, but I didn't know what to do. When you spoke up, it showed me that doing the right thing doesn't require permission. Thank you for showing me how to speak up by doing it yourself." A grateful kid with a second chance, Eleanor pressed the letter to her chest, not because it flattered her, but because it reminded her of something she'd always believed, that noticing mattered, that speaking up had power, that ordinary people could prevent disaster, quietly, bravely, and without applause. The next time she visited the Grove, she didn't sit in the corner booth. She walked up to the host stand, greeted the same young man who had fumbled silverware weeks before. "I believe I owe someone a proper lunch," came a deep voice behind her. Magic Johnson, smiling, sunglasses perched atop his head, extended an arm toward the booth. "I hear you're famous now," he said. "Apparently," she replied, chuckling. They sat, ordered, and talked. Not about fame, not even about the incident, but about their lives, their paths, and how close calls have a way of waking people up. As they finished their meal, Eleanor folded her napkin and looked around the restaurant. Everything felt clearer now, sharper. She wasn't invisible anymore. She was still watching. If this story moved you, subscribe to the channel for more real-life tales of courage and conscience. And don't stop here. Click the video on your screen to keep exploring the world of untold stories that matter.